Welcome to another Ziva Math video. This is the first video about adding integers where we'll focus on adding integers that have the same sign. Grab your paper and pencil and let's get started. When adding integers with the same sign, we have two steps. First, we're going to add the absolute value of the numbers that are in our problem, and then we're going to keep the sign of those numbers. So if I have two positive numbers, my answer will be positive. If I'm adding two negative numbers, my sum will be negative. So first, let's look at adding two positive integers, and we're going to look at it with the number line. So now I have 3 plus 4, and we're going to do this just like you've been adding. If we start at 0, we're going to go to the right 3. That's adding our positive 3. And then if we're adding a positive 4, we're continuing on to the right 4. So we've got positive 4, so positive 3 plus positive 4 is 7. We follow the steps of taking the absolute value of 3 and adding it to the absolute value of 4, keeping the sign of the numbers in our problem for a sum of positive 7. So our steps for doing these problems were to take the absolute value of the numbers in our problem, so the absolute value of 6 plus the absolute value of 8, so 6 plus 8 is 14, and we keep the sign of the numbers in our problem, so positive 14. And we're going to do the same steps to 20 plus 31. Again, looking at the absolute value of both the numbers in our problem. So the absolute value of 20 is 20, the absolute value of 31 is 31, and 20 plus 31 is 51. Remember, you've been adding positive numbers for years, so there's no reason to worry about applying the steps if you already know how to do the problems. You know that 6 plus 8 is 14, and you know you can take 20 and add it to 31 for a sum of 51. So I always tell my students, if it looks like an addition problem you've been doing for years, go ahead and just solve it because your steps for addition are not changing. So now let's consider adding two negative numbers with negative 2 plus negative 5. And let's look at this first on the number line. If I'm going to start at 0 and go negative 2, I'm going to the left 2 places. And then if I'm going to add negative 5, I'm going to continue going to the left, and I'm going to go to the left 5 more places on my number line. So negative 2 plus negative 5 is negative 7. And our rule said that we would add our absolute value and keep the sign, so negative 7. So let's consider one more with the number line, negative 4 plus negative 2. So if we start at 0, if I'm going to put negative 4 on my number line, I'm going to the left 4 places, so negative 4. And if I'm going to be adding negative 2 to that, I'm going to be continuing to the left, and I'm going to continue to the left 2 more places. So if I'm going to add negative 4 plus negative 2, I'm going to get negative 6. And looking at our steps, which said to take the absolute value of 4 plus the absolute value of 2, 4 plus 2 is 6, and then to keep the sign of my add-ins, which were both negative, so I get a sum of negative 6. So now let's look at a few examples without a number line. Remember, our steps were to add the absolute values of our numbers and to keep the sign when we add integers with the same sign. So looking at our first problem here, we have negative 6 plus negative 4. So I'm going to need to take the absolute value of negative 6, which is 6. Then I'll need the absolute value of negative 4. The absolute value of negative 4 is 4. And my steps are to add my absolute values. So 6 plus 4 is 10. And then I'm going to keep the sign of my add-ins. So I'm going to keep the negative sign. So my sum will be negative 10. For my next problem, we have negative 12 plus negative 6, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to take the absolute value of negative 12, which is 12. We're going to take the absolute value of negative 6, which is 6, because my steps say if I'm adding integers with the same sign, I'm going to add their absolute values. So 12 plus 6 is 18, and then I'm going to keep the sign. So the sign of my add-ins was negative, so my answer will be negative 18. And let's just look at a couple more. So we have negative 3 plus negative 7. So I'll have 3 plus 7. 3 plus 7 is 10. And I'm going to keep the negative sign. So my sum is negative 10. So for the last problem, we have negative 5 plus negative 26. So following my steps, I'm going to take the absolute value of negative 5, which is 5, the absolute value of negative 26, which is 26. 5 plus 26 is 31, and I will keep the sign of my add-ins for a sum of negative 31. Thank you for joining us, and look for more videos by Ziva Math coming soon on YouTube.